Job 6119. Record date 6/5/63. Program Rise of Labor.
This is a story about labor, told by the people who lived it. You will see their story. You will hear their voices.
We were fighting scabs. We had to fight the police department. We also had to fight management. Sometimes it got pretty rough.
For some, the 20s were a ball. For labor, they were a terrible time.
It was really slavery. I felt if I had to work like this the rest of my life, I might as well be dead.
Some people say, why should we review all this? Why bring it up again? I think we should, just as we repeat to our children the struggles in the Revolutionary War. This is part of America, part of the history. And so it should be told for that reason.
Good evening. I'm Arthur Kennedy. Tonight, a story about labor. There's a story of how labor won the right in America to organize and to bargain collectively with management. Our story is a story of the past, but it contains a lesson for the present. The lesson has to do with the genius of America. Its genius for solving fundamental social problems democratically, with a minimum of violence, with due process of law, without totalitarian decree. Today, in the face of problems as difficult as any labor has known, America must call on that genius again.
Come all of you good people, a story I will tell of how the good old Union came in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Blessed is every man that toileth, for he shall eat the labor of his hands. Happy shall he be, and it shall be well with him. His wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of his house, his children like olive plants round about his table. Yea, he shall see his children's children, and peace upon the land. This is the story about all working men. It is told in part through the story of one working man, a coal miner. The miners know the story of labor. They lived it. Theirs was the first mass industrial union. They organized in 1902. They led the way. Each day, the miners go under the earth to dig in the dark for coal. To reach the black rock, they ride in carts. They ride deep into darkness. They ride as far as 8 miles into the earth. The story of their lives is in their hands.
You might say these hands are rough. They should be. I lost a piece of this finger in the mines. Many men have lost their lives.
This man is Andy Morris. We will hear his story. We will hear of 30 years' work in the mines, of the struggle to make a union. We will hear what life has held and holds in store for this man.
It's not easy being a miner, but it's a lot better now than it was. When my daddy was in the mines, they treated the mules better than the men. That was before the union. I think the union's the greatest thing in the world. It took blood to build it, but it was worth it. It gave us a chance to live like men. People forget that now. They forget what it was like. I guess even some of the miners forget, especially younger ones who had it handed down to them on a silver platter. They forget working in the dark, up to your knees in water, loading coal by hand. They forget the bodies being carried out in blankets and the women crying because there was no safety in the mines. They forget living in the houses that the company built for you and that you could never leave. They forget the company store that you had to buy in. And if you didn't like it, get out of town. They forget when the company guards would bust your head with a club. They forget working from sunup to sundown. They forget the hungry kids. People forget these things, but I don't. Dad doesn't either. We remember. It's important to remember how it was and what we did. Otherwise, how can we understand what's happening today and what needs to be done? Things are better for us, sure. But if you look around, you'll see we still have bad problems today. Maybe different from then, but bad. I figure sometimes it's good to look back.
"1917, the year Andy Morris was born. The year America goes to war. The nation needs coal, ships, guns. Employment goes up, wages rise. For the first time, labor is represented on government boards. Samuel Gompers, president of the American Federation of Labor, and John L. Lewis of the mine workers serve on these boards. Unions do exist in America at this time. The AFL has 2 million members, but these are skilled workers. The vast majority of workers, 35 million of them, are unorganized. Their lot is hard. Little pay, long hours. There are no minimum wage or hour laws. There are no federal laws prohibiting child labor. The unskilled have no rights, and there is no legal compulsion for management to recognize unions. Still, labor is optimistic. And in Wilson, labor has a president favorable to the working man. Wilson says, "A nation is as great and only as great as her rank and file." Wilson's idealism inspires the nation. His promise of a new freedom seems to give purpose to the war. November 1918, armistice. 10,000 dead men, 2 million crippled and maimed. At home, a wild holiday, the boys return. They return, they think, to inherit a new world of freedom and justice. Wilson travels to Paris to make that world. He finds politics as usual over there. He is betrayed. He predicts another war in a generation. His League of Nations dies in a hostile Congress. Idealism does too.
The politicians sold us down the river. All those men died for nothing.
Cynical and disillusioned, America turns its back on Wilson's lofty goals. It turns to a search for kicks. For some, the 20s are a ball. For others, it is an ugly time. A time of hate. Hatred of all things foreign. In Russia, the Bolsheviks have seized power. They promise world revolution. In America, a communist party emerges. Communists assume leading roles among workers in a few industries, in steel, in fur and leather. The logging fields of the Northwest give birth to the industrial workers of the world. The radicals are few in number, but a wave of hysteria sweeps America. Attorney General Mitchell Palmer orders a series of raids on subversives. He arrests a few communists, but his dragnet picks up innocent people as well. All are deported. It is a witch hunt.
My name is Jacob Spolansky. In 1919, I became a special agent of the FBI. Every one of the agents was given a certain quota for the rest. My quota was 1,000. On January 2nd, 1920, raids were made all over the country. About 6,000 people were arrested. Ireland arrested about 1,000 people. Those arrested were deported on a transport. We didn't have any warrants. Many of the arrested didn't know the first thing about communism.
In the hysteria, labor, too, becomes an object of hatred and suspicion. It is considered radical, dangerous, foreign. Bitter strikes break out among workers attempting to organize in steel, in transportation, a general strike in Seattle. The strikes are brutally crushed. Most of the gains labor has made are lost. Membership in unions dwindles. The police, the press, the courts, the state legislatures are against the unions. The story in coal is typical. After the war, there is less need for coal. Production slumps, and returning veterans crowd the job market.
The 20s were rough. The hills here had more than coal dust on them in those days. They were stained with blood, too. I was just a kid then, but I remember being afraid. I remember how bad it was. The coal operators had the miners against the wall. They decided to cut wages way down, and they told the miners to take it or leave it. They decided to smash the union. The miners poured their water out of their lunch pails and went on strike all over the country. Then the operators brought in scabs, and that meant war to us. It was guns against guns. In Heron, we killed them. In Mingo and Logan County, they killed us. I don't know how many were killed, but when they brought in the scabs, we fought them. We fought the cops, detectives, even the state militia. Then they threw us out of the company homes. There was no credit at the company store. We lived in tents. Our kids went hungry and barefooted. Finally, they starved us back to work. There was no union for many years. They were terrible times. I'll never forget them.
There are two Americas now. One of them is hungry and hard, angry and fearful. The other is confident and smug, prosperous and gay. For a decade in the 20s, these two Americas exist uneasily, side by side. Sometime, somehow, it had to end. In 1929, it did. The rise of labor. The story of how American workers struggled for justice in a free society. 1929. A grayness comes over America, a silence, a desperate time. 1 out of every 4 workers is unemployed. Wages have dropped 60%. 250,000 homeless men and boys drift about the country. The banks are closing.
Back in the early days of the Depression, coal mining was in a state of collapse. You couldn't look to our union for help because we didn't have much of a union then. If you wanted to keep working, you had to give the foreman a bottle of whiskey. Daddy worked so hard we wouldn't see him until Sunday, and then he'd be in bed all day. The mines were only paying around 30 cents a ton. That's less than $3 a day. And they would cheat you on the weight. Maybe you would load 2 tons for every ton you got paid for. One day, I walked all the way from Scotts Run to Morgantown. I'll never forget it. I asked for a bag of flour, and they refused it. I threatened to kill someone, and I meant it. I guess I lost my head, but I got my flour pretty quick then. We were all getting pretty mean. We were in an ugly mood. Something had to be done. They didn't seem to understand that in Washington.
President Hoover is blamed for the Depression. One event focuses resentment on him. 15,000 World War I veterans, many with wives and children, traveled to Washington in late spring 1932. They camped there in shanties. Up against it, they want to be paid their war bonuses. They're not due until 1945, but they need the money now. In response, Hoover sends 4 troops of cavalry, a company of infantry, a mounted machine gun squadron, and 6 tanks.
In 1918, we were heroes. Now, they call us Reds and crooks. I swear I didn't think they would attack. They came with tear gas and clubs, and they drove us out. They burned down our huts. I'll never forget the sight of American soldiers attacking American war veterans.
Depression worsens. Confidence in democratic government falters. Demagogues appear. Some believe America must turn to fascism or communism. A United States senator says if this country ever needed a Mussolini, it needs one now. But the nation wants a leader who can solve its problems democratically. It gets one.
This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Nor need we shrink from honestly facing conditions in our country today. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper.
I stayed out of the mines that day to hear Roosevelt speak. It cost me $6 in wages, but it was worth it.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
I was organizing the docks then, which is no bed of roses. And I said to myself, geez, this guy's going to make my job a lot easier.
Roosevelt acts. A. Burley, brain truster.
The Congress of the 100 Days met on March 4th, 1933, and in the next 3 months, a whole series of major acts were passed. 15 major acts in all. That 100 days, the history of the United States was changed for all time.
To labor, the most important legislation is the National Recovery Act. NRA is designed to stimulate recovery by ending cutthroat business competition. Industry is encouraged to fix prices and production. Industries which cooperate receive the Blue Eagle, government symbol of their cooperation. At the heart of NRA is Section 7A. It grants labor the right to bargain collectively. To John L. Lewis, 7A is a green light. But he knows that the outcome will depend on labor's power, not the words of an act. So he reaches deep into his union's treasury. He sends an army of organizers into Kentucky, Pennsylvania, West Virginia to rebuild the mine workers. The drive is on. Andy Morris is caught up in that drive. He joins the union.
One night I went down to the Union Hall in Scotch Run with Daddy. I went to join the union. I'll never forget that day in all my life. The men were arguing about something. They were mad and I was afraid they wouldn't take me in. Then the man says, "This is George Morris's boy. He wants to join the union." And then the other said, "His pa's a good union man. Let him join." And I did.
That same summer, in 90 days, thousands of miners like Andy Morris joined the union. The long, lean years of fighting to build their own strength are over. Now the miners are ready for a bigger job. Under Lewis, they will spearhead a drive to unionize all mass production workers. You've been watching the story of the rise of labor, told by the actual people who lived it. Told by this man, Andy Morris. He's a coal miner. He lives in Morgantown, West Virginia. This is his story.
1937 or 38, somewhere around there, John L. Lewis announced he was giving money to something called CIO. We didn't know much about it then. Mr. Lewis was trying to organize workers in rubber, steel, autos, and other industries like that, the unskilled workers. He announced he was going to give money out of our union treasury for that. Some of the miners complained. They didn't think our dues should be used that way. But I felt differently. I felt we should help. I figured if you have an auto worker in Detroit that's in trouble, you will eventually feel it yourself. But if he's well off, you will benefit too. I thought it was important for us all to help each other.
Lewis sets out to organize the unorganized. It is a formidable task. To do it, three things are required: an organization, help from Washington, and a major victory in a mass production industry. In 1935, Lewis creates the organization he needs, the CIO. It is formed in Atlantic City, where the American Federation of Labor is holding its annual convention. Under Lewis, a group of unions split away from the AFL. They pool their money and form a new organization, the CIO. Lewis is elected first president of the CIO. In Lewis, workers have a remarkable leader. In the CIO, they have a powerful instrument of social change. Lewis has his organization. His second need is help from Washington. NRA has been declared unconstitutional. Lewis wants a new law. He gets it. In 1935, Congress passes the Wagner Act. It gives labor a position in our life it never had before. Under this law, employers are forbidden to interfere with labor's organizing in any way. They're forbidden to restrain workers from joining any union they wished. This law is the Magna Carta of labor. Other legislation is needed. It will follow. But first, Roosevelt must be elected for a second term.
Go into most any miner's home and you will find two pictures on the wall: John L. Lewis and Franklin Roosevelt. Lewis gave us our union, and Roosevelt gave us the laws we needed to help us. We couldn't have made the gains we have made in this country without these men. We went 100% for Roosevelt in 36. The union and the CIO backed him strong.
Roosevelt is in office for a second term. Labor has the CIO. It has the Wagner Act. The stage is set. Now only one thing is needed: a victory in a mass production industry. Millions of unorganized workers are ready. Once started, they will unleash a mighty social force. But someone has to be first. By 1900, the automobile is a practical method of transportation. Henry Ford launches his motor company in 1903. 5 years later, he introduces the assembly line. Cars are mass-produced. The automobile revolutionizes life. It becomes the backbone of American industrial might. It is a symbol of American progress. Autos devour American steel, glass, copper, rubber. They devour American workers as well. The line is hard, fast, and dirty. Working conditions are brutal. Auto workers earn less than $25 a week. They work up to 10 or 11 hours a day with no overtime. They are spied upon and intimidated. At 35 or 40, they are fired to make way for younger men.
They were taking young, strong boys from the high schools and use them for all they were worth for maybe 10, 15 years. And then they were on the industrial scrap heap. When you were 35 in the auto industry, you were off on the industrial scrap heap.
There were no vacations. There was no grievance procedure. There was no benefits. There was nothing.
The auto workers want to organize, but Detroit is the citadel of the open shop. Workers who talk union are fired on the spot. To prevent organizing, the auto companies hire spies. They also hire private armies. A Senate committee investigates these practices.
I was assigned to conduct the investigations at the field level. We found industries massing arsenals of tear gas, firearms, guns of bulletproof vests, clubs. These arsenals were really formidable.
It was like preparation for war. The war will come. The leaders of the auto workers are young, tough, committed. Some of them, it is true, are communists, but most are not, and the communists will be driven out of the union later. Now, secretly, the workers build their strength. The showdown is near. The decisions are made. General Motors will be the target for the first action. Flint, Michigan will be the place. Why General Motors? Why Flint? Roy Ruther.
General Motors was the recognized leader of the builders of automobiles. If the auto union was to be established, we had to establish it at the heart of the automobile industry. We felt if you could break through in this powerful company-dominated town, then we could certainly do a job in these other centers.
In 1936, GM produces over a third of all cars and trucks made in the world. In Flint, there are 50,000 auto workers. Only a few hundred belong to the union. The Flint strike begins on December 30th, 1936. The switches are pulled. The machinery stops. Workers pour out of Fisher Body number 1 and 2 in Flint. But this is a new kind of strike. Other workers remain inside. This is a sit-down strike. Workers sit down in the plants. They're out to win one thing only, recognition. They will sit down 44 days to win it. Eventually, the sit-down is ruled illegal, but it is effective. The strike spreads. 16 plants in 11 states go down. Production halts. Management is furious.
How would you feel if somebody who was working in your home just took over your home? Managements felt the same way about the union taking over their plants.
Inside the plants, the workers prepare to sit it out.
We were well organized inside the plant. We had patrols and details. It was like running an army.
We knew we were going to win. We knew we weren't going to leave till we did win.
Frank Murphy is governor in Michigan. His role is crucial. He brings labor and management together. The positions are rigid. Management accuses the workers of being in the plants illegally. The company will not bargain until they get out. Lewis wants a contract recognizing the union as sole bargaining agent. The workers will not get out of the plants until they have it. The lines are drawn. On January 2nd, GM goes to the courts. The company obtains an injunction ordering the strikers out. But the judge who issues the injunction owns $200,000 worth of GM stock. The union has the injunction thrown out. Now a new move is made. On January 11th, almost the entire police force of Flint attacks the strikers. It is the Battle of Bull's Run.
It was January 11th. Cops attacked us and tried to throw us out of the plant. They hit us with everything they had. Tear gas, vomit gas. It was just terrible. There was blood. They were screaming. There was so much confusion. The men just didn't know what to do. They just didn't know what to do.
I was standing by the window, and a cop stuck his gun through the window. He smashed the glass right almost in my face. He fired the gun, and I couldn't see.
Workers. Only a few hundred belong to the Union. The Flint strike begins on December 30th, 1936. The switches are pulled. The machinery stops. Workers pour out of Fisher Body number 1 and 2 in Flint. But this is a new kind of strike. Other workers remain inside. This is a sit-down strike. Workers sit down in the plants. They're out to win one thing only, recognition. They will sit down 44 days to win it. Eventually, the sit-down is ruled illegal, but it is effective. The strike spreads. 16 plants in 11 states go down. Production halts. Management is furious.
How would you feel if somebody who was working in your home just took over your home? Managements felt the same way about the union taking over their plants.
Inside the plants, the workers prepare to sit it out.
We were well organized inside the plant. We had patrols and details. It was like running an army.
We knew we were going to win. We knew we weren't going to leave till we did win.
Frank Murphy is governor in Michigan. His role is crucial. He brings labor and management together. The positions are rigid. Management accuses the workers of being in the plants illegally. The company will not bargain until they get out. Lewis wants a contract recognizing the union as sole bargaining agent. The workers will not get out of the plants until they have it. The lines are drawn. On January 2nd, GM goes to the courts. The company obtains an injunction ordering the strikers out. But the judge who issues the injunction owns $200,000 worth of GM stock. The union has the injunction thrown out. Now a new move is made. On January 11th, almost the entire police force of Flint attacks the strikers. It is the Battle of Bull's Run.
It was January 11th. Cops attacked us and tried to throw us out of the plant. They hit us with everything they had. Tear gas, vomit gas. It was just terrible. There was blood. They were screaming. There was so much confusion. The men just didn't know what to do. They just didn't know what to do.
I was standing by the window, and a cop stuck his gun through the window. He smashed the glass right almost in my face. He fired the gun, and I couldn't see for about 3 days. I was blind for 3 days. It was a hell of a fight, but we beat them, and they ran away. That's why they call it, I guess, the Battle of the Bull's Run.
The next morning, the National Guard is called into Flint, 1,500 troops. The strikers find themselves staring down the muzzles of machine guns.
I went down the hill to see the boys from the militia. When they saw me coming, they took the covers off of those machine guns, and that made me nervous.
Pressure is put on Murphy to use the guard. He refuses.
I'm not going to settle this strike by force and violence. There isn't going to be mob rule here. The public interest comes first. It is above that of either or both parties to this controversy. We will work our way out of this strike peacefully and without injustice to anyone.
Now the company obtains a legal injunction. The strikers are ordered to leave the plants by 8 p.m. the next day. If they do not get out, they'll be forced out. If they resist, there will be blood. That night, the strikers meet in the plants. They decide to resist. Flint strike is in its 34th day on February 2nd, 1937. The strikers are ordered to leave the plants or be forced out. If they resist, there will be blood. They decide to stay. They send a telegram to Governor Murphy. Governor, we have decided to stay in the plant. We have no illusions about this decision. We expect many of us will be killed. We take this means of making it known to our wives, to our children, to the people of the state of Michigan and the country. You are the one who must be held responsible for our deaths. Desperately, the governor appeals to both sides to negotiate. Lewis rushes to Detroit from Washington. Neither side wants open warfare, and the strike is hurting GM badly. Its dividends have been cut in half. GM agrees to the principle of recognition, but only for a trial period of 2 months. Lewis, adamant, insists on 6 months. He will not compromise. Another crisis develops. The talks break off. The company insists on immediate enforcement of the injunction. The entire state guard is put on alert. Preparations are made to seal all roads into Flint. Hundreds of thousands of workers pour into the city. They are armed. Brigades of women surround the plants. On the night of February 8th, the governor declares a state of insurrection. He orders the guard into the plants. He shows the order to Lewis. "What will you do, John?" he asks. "I shall enter the plant," Lewis replies. "I shall bare my bosom. Mine will be the first breasts struck by your bullets." It is the crucial moment of the strike. Someone must back down. The company does not want a holocaust. It capitulates. 44 days after the strike begins, at 3 in the morning on February 14th, 1937, GM officials call on John L. Lewis in his Detroit hotel room. Years later, in a speech before thousands, Lewis recalls that moment.
And one morning, at 3 o'clock in the morning, on one of the high floors of the Statler Hotel, they walked into my room when I was in bed. And they had on their overcoats. And they had their hard hats in their hands. And their gloves on. Because the room was cold, I didn't get up. And they said that they would sign the contract at 11 o'clock that morning in Governor Murphy's courtroom. And they did. And they did.
In signing the contract, GM agrees to recognize the union. It is a historic moment, a hopeful moment.
The peace will be a lasting one because it was brought about without force and violence. I trust it will mean a new mutual atmosphere of goodwill and good faith between employer and employee.
The auto workers are jubilant. They've won the first union contract in the history of the industry. They swarm out of the plants. They come out to celebrate something that they and General Motors can both take pride in. Together, they have reaffirmed a basic American principle. Walter Reuther.
I think the genius of American society is its capability of achieving unity in diversity, and of having people with conflicting economic interests recognizing that there are certain basic core values that they share in common, and while on the fringe of those values they have areas of conflict, they're able to resolve problems in the interest of the whole of our community.
Roy Reuther was there. He remembers.
I'll never forget as long as I live the exhilaration in the city of Flint. I'll never forget the joy, the tears, every street, every way you walked and looked in Flint was just seething humanity. Joy, singing, music. There was just great joy in Flint because a new day had arrived.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever.
Within a year after the Flint strike, the auto workers grew to 500,000 members. A wave of organizing sweeps the country in steel, in rubber, in textiles, in copper, in transportation, in all industry. Within a year, union membership in America doubles. Then it doubles again. The unorganized are organized. What does it all mean? A woman gardens in Morgantown, West Virginia. A 12-year-old girl practices the piano. A 15-year-old boy listens. The woman is the wife of Andy Morris. This is his daughter and son. Each day after work, he comes home to them.
I like this street. I like living here. We have good schools here, good neighbors, grass and trees. I rent my house. It takes a good bite out of my wages, but it's a nice place to come home to after work. When I think of all the hard years, all the things I've seen and been through, I'm proud of what I've been able to accomplish. 30 years ago, I began digging coal in the mines. I had nothing. I was hungry and afraid. I was hanging on by my teeth. Now that's changed. Life is better. I make about $26 a day now. I have a retirement plan, free medical care, a car, this house. My children go to school. They take music lessons. The union has helped me have all this. With the union, a coal miner is a man, not a machine, not a number on paper, but a man. Once when I was a kid, my daddy said to me, "Andy, never cross a picket line." I never did, and I never will. A picket line is the union, and the union is a sacred thing to a man like me.
Andy Morris has lived through much. The union has meant much to him. But the story is not over yet. If it is important to look back, it is also important to look ahead. This one machine does the work of 200 men. Its impact can be seen here.
The machines have come to the mine, and that's one of the things putting men out of work. Where will it end? I don't know.
The coal miners have lost 300,000 jobs to automation. The same pattern is repeating itself in all basic industries. In the 60s, an average of 2.5 million jobs a year will be lost to automation. It is labor's chief problem. It is everybody's problem. Sam Fishman, local representative, United Auto Workers.
Automation is not just the problems that the labor movement has in this country, but it's your problem, it's everybody's problem, and it affects the entire economy. And for those who aren't affected by it today, the guarantee is it will affect them tomorrow. So don't forget, tomorrow this thing is going to hit you too.
Automation is one problem. There are many others. Today, labor is a sick giant. Its membership is dropping. Its leaders are old and tired. Its passion for social reform has cooled. It is riddled with scandal. It is apathetic. It is torn with dissension. It is under attack by even its closest friends.
The Negroes in labor movement are bewildered at this time. They were there on the picket lines and lost just as much blood and shed just as many tears and missed just as many paydays as the white. How is it this late stage of the game, the Negroes are still not sharing in the same benefits? There are many unions where a Negro cannot belong.
Jimmy Hoffa's been up before a congressional committee. Now, they haven't proved anything yet, but those charges of racketeering sure don't help labor any.
Only 12% in the white-collar group are organized. We cannot reach them. We can't communicate with them. We do not know their language yet.
These long strikes are killing us. I think we lose money on them. There's got to be some way of them being settled without going so long.
Sure, we have power in the union. We have the strength to tie up everything we want. Our strikes are 100% effective. But I wonder if we use this strength wisely.
The labor movement has lost its zeal. It's lost its passionate will to move in behalf of the downtrodden. If labor is to really be great, as it was in the 30s, it must be a passion, it must become a movement.
Are there answers to these problems? What are they? What can be learned from the past? What is labor's future? George Meany, president of the AFL-CIO.
Well, looking at the future, I feel quite optimistic. We have problems, but the problems are problems that come with changes in our system, changes in the times. And I think labor is changing with the times. I think that we have a very intelligent membership. I think that our leaders are better equipped to meet the problems of today than perhaps were the leaders of 20 or 25 years ago.
Walter Reuther, president of the United Auto Workers.
I think that we're too smug and we're too complacent, we're too indifferent. I do not think that we have fully comprehended the dimensions of the challenge that we face in the world or the problems that must be resolved, nor have we really understood the broad scope of the opportunities that automation and the new technology put within our grasp.
Bertram Powers, president, Local 6, International Typographical Union.
We don't oppose automation merely because it's more productive. In fact, we're not in opposition to automation, but we are in opposition to any idea that automation should be called progress in the name of just throwing people on slag piles.
I think one thing that's got to be done in this country, I think the employer has got to concede that when he's introducing machinery that's displacing large numbers of workers, that what happens to those workers is his concern as well as the union's concern. And I think that where this concession is made, the union and employer working together, they can offset the adverse effects that come from automation.
The employer isn't going to do this because it's just. He's going to do it because he's made to do it, and sometimes it's going to take a strike to make him do it.
Unfortunately, if a strike is about unemployment, then it's very difficult to settle because you really can't create jobs at the bargaining table.
We've had more than 5% of our people unemployed for a period of 5 years now, and this unemployment is growing. And we feel that one of the answers to this is a shorter work week, a statutory 35-hour week, which we feel would possibly put 5 or 6 million people to work, which would certainly make quite a dent in our unemployment picture.
I'm opposed to government interference with the right to negotiate. I'm opposed to them interfering against the unions or against management.
Now, where there is a breakdown in the collective bargaining process, and that breakdown puts in jeopardy the interest of the whole of our society, then government of necessity must intervene.
I don't think, however, in the long run that injecting the government to a greater degree in the picture is going to solve the problem. I think the government has a role to play, but I don't think it's the role of compulsion. I don't think that compulsion is the answer.
There are people who say that labor is waning and that labor unions won't exist in 20 years and such. And I'm not one that believes this. I think that there will always be labor unions, always be some organization to represent working people, and I believe that there will always be working people.
The function of the American trade union movement is quite simple, and of course, Mr. Gompers years ago wrapped it up by saying what the American trade union movement wanted is more.
There might have been some slight validity to that point of view in the days of Mr. Gompers. but it has no validity in the 20th century in which a modern labor movement has to work. A modern labor movement cannot solve its problems in a vacuum, and that therefore more and more the labor movement has to become a social movement in which it tries to articulate a responsible position in trying to help shape the broad policies of the whole of society and try to find a way to relate the resources of society to the solution of its basic problems.
This has been the story of the rise of labor, the story of all working men, the story of one man. Andy Morris has known struggle and conflict. Now he shares in the good things of life. He faces the future with hope. The University of West Virginia is located in Morgantown, where Andy Morris lives. It has stood here for 96 years. Sometimes when Andy Morris has a day off, he comes here with his son, Andy Jr.
When I was 18, I went with my father into the mines. I worked there all my life, as he had worked there before me. We worked under the ground. We worked digging the black coal that stains your body and clogs your lungs so that you can never escape it. Next year, I will come here with my boy. He will not dig coal. He will come here to college. He will have a better life than my own. Seeing him here in the sun, walking near these beautiful buildings, I know this is what I struggled for. This is what the hardship, the suffering, the fight to make the Union was all about, so that my boy could come here. He will learn to use his mind and not just his back like me. He will live like a man, taking from the world and giving to it also. This is his future. Please God, this is how it will be.
His daddy was a miner, and he's a miner's son, and he'll stick with the Union till every battle's won. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Blessed is every man that toileth, for he shall eat the labor of his hands. Happy shall he be, and it shall be well with him. His wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of his house, his children like olive plants round about his table. Yea, he shall see his children's children, and peace upon the land.
Come all of you good people, a story we did tell of how the good old Union came in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? A story full of triumph, a story full of strife, of how your daddies worked to make a better life. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? I know dark clouds will gather round me. I know my way is rough and steep, but golden fields lie out before me, where God's own children no more shall weep.